Welcome to continuing coverage of the Texas gubernatorial election 2022 on Denton Community Television by students of the Mayborn School of Journalism. I'm Austin Wright. Our focus is on the issues important to Gen Z voters as they prepare to make their decisions to support candidates in the Texas general election on November 8th. Our current focus is on the current issues of immigration and other Latina issues and their effects on young voters' opinions. UNC political science professor Dr. Michael Eschbach-Sohag gives us his expert opinion. Tell me a little bit about your expertise.
I tend to study the presidency with a focus on the news media. In particular, I'm writing a book-length project right now on the presidency and immigration. So we look at presidential speeches and how presidents talk about immigration, how often they talk about it, in what tone, positive or negative, and then whether the president's speeches have any impact on legislation before Congress, news coverage, and public opinion.
Have you observed any patterns in how young voters approach controversies or political subject matter?
Well, young voters tend to be more disengaged than other age groups in terms of voting and participation, gathering news information, and so on. But we have seen an uptick over the last 4 years, certainly since the 2018 election, of younger voters being more engaged, participating more. We had a historic increase in voter turnout in 2018 nationwide, and the largest change, positive change and increase, was among voters between the ages of 18 and 29. So we're beginning to see what appears to be greater enthusiasm among young voters. The question is always, whether this is an isolated incident. Was it a reaction to the Donald Trump presidency? Will it continue into 2022 when a Democrat is in the White House?
Based on the recent increase in registered young voters, how do you believe this might affect the election?
Well, that suggests that young voters are more mobilized and engaged than they had been in prior elections. Part of that increase is going to be that you have a lot of people who weren't previously registered, right? And so if you're not previously registered, in order to vote, you need to register. So in some ways, that's not the best comparison in terms of, engagement, enthusiasm relative to other age groups, because those age groups presumably are already registered. So the question is, are people going to register? That's interesting. It's an indicator. Are they going to translate that into the more difficult step of turning out to vote, right? Voters who haven't voted before are entering a new environment that, for those of us who vote regularly, it's fairly easy to navigate. But if you've just registered to vote and you haven't participated, now you need to go through the more difficult step of figuring out where to vote, getting your voter registration card, making sure that in the state of Texas your ID matches what your voter registration roll looks like. So there are a lot of complications that could mean that even though this is important, again, it's an indicator of enthusiasm among young voters, will this translate into turnout on Election Day? We'll see. Some people wake up on November 8th and be like, it's raining, I don't want to get wet. Some people be like, I was interested in this 2 months ago, but I have other things to do now. So we'll see. But I think it is, maybe not, a one-for-one increase in voter turnout among that age group, but certainly suggestive that more people are getting involved.
What parallels do you see between the candidates of the 2020 presidential election and the candidates of the 2022 Texas gubernatorial election?
Yeah. Well, the rhetoric is similar. In the United States, we still have even Democratic presidents like Barack Obama and Joe Biden. There's still a foundation of law and order, right? That's the expectation. So even in the gubernatorial debate last week, even Beto O'Rourke was emphasizing trying to hit that point of law and order and downplaying this idea of open borders, which seems to be an easy shot that Republicans can take at Democrats of being too passive with these issues. So I think we see some similarities. Real question is sort of like, what is the solution to these particular issues? You know, Greg Abbott's position is that it's the federal government's fault. They need to handle this, and that's in many ways correct. The federal government needs to get involved in solving these problems, but immigration is one of these issues that everybody recognizes a problem, everybody complains about and wants to address, but nobody's been able to offer a solution that everybody can agree on, and that makes it very tricky. And I think that there's not a huge issue across, or huge difference across age. The only difference might be that you know, DACA is more likely to affect your friends if you happen to be Gen Z, right? So you might have more personal experience with somebody who is you know, affected by that. You might share concerns with that. But generally speaking, DACA is something that is widely supported in the United States. The issue has been, how do you generate enough support at the federal level to codify it so it's stable and a permanent part of policy?
How should we expect young voters to view subjects such as immigration and DACA in the upcoming election?
Yeah, well, I think, you know, any issue that is salient is going to inform somebody's choice about whether they want to be involved and whether they want to vote. For the 2022 election, I would say immigration is important, but it doesn't appear to be the top issue. You know, the economy is always a concern of all voters, including young voters, particularly those who might be looking at hitting the job market next year after graduation. Abortion is timely and important given the Dobbs Supreme Court decision that overturned Roe versus Wade. School shootings, you know, gun control in general given Uvalde. Immigration is always there unless there's some substantial change, something that might shake up the status quo. For the most part, the issue of immigration is going to split on party lines, right? And that's where it is. But there really isn't in this election sort of a definitive, I'm going to do this on immigration if I'm elected. You know, certainly we're going to have we're going to have fewer, you know, busing and of migrants to northern cities if Beto O'Rourke is elected governor. They both bring different elements to the immigration debate in Texas. One is governor, one is representative and city council member in El Paso. But it just doesn't strike me that immigration is sort of that game-changing issue for the 2022 election. It's just a very complicated issue that most people don't know how to solve.